All right, this is part 2 of what's it, February 4th, Bryce's trade review. And yeah, I'm gonna review another painful day of futures. Yesterday, just chopped sideways. Yesterday was a red day. Didn't get anything yesterday. Today was a little bit better. Actually, it wasn't that much better to be honest. I mean, it was green. It was a green day, but it was very painful today. Pretty unlucky too. Today was painful. But anyways, we just came off of a bright green morning trading options. I mean, my sentiment was only bullish and it only went up. So it's very hard to be anything but bright green on a day like today. And where I started my futures trading was roughly at like 825-ish. Right here is pretty much where I started. And as you can tell, I don't really have much. I have this pivot all the way up here. I have this pivot up here. NQ, I got nothing. I got nothing on NQ anywhere near. This is a pivot up here, but I don't think I charted it out. I think I did. I think I charted this one out. Minor, fairly minor. I mean, it's pointy. It's only major on the 1 minute, not on any other time frames. All right, so as you guys know, typically when we run really hard during the first hour, what looks good right now? Consolidation. So I'm expecting a lot of pain and going to do my best to have a lot of patience. Immediately right off the bat, we're coming down. We swept a higher high. So I was hoping we would sweep a lower low and maybe put in a bull flag or something so I can go for a continuation trade to this pivot here. We didn't. And we came back up. On that green candle, you can see that NQ stronger than ES. Starts heading up. I don't have a trade. It's coming down. ES swept lower lows. That's bullish. I didn't pull the trigger on this candle though, because it bugged me that NQ made higher lows after only making a higher high. Or it made one lower high, but it made a higher high here. So it did bug me, but it was very bullish, and it was bullish to the pivot. So within the next candle, I actually dip bought it. I actually entered roughly here. Still waited for the close of the candle. Very tight stop loss on this trade. You can see how tight that is. I don't know why my long tool keeps doing that. And the PT was not that far. I know that for a fact. The PT was not that far. I think I just went 1.4-ish for the PT. I didn't bring it all the way to the pivot. If the bull pennant was a lot better looking of a bull pennant, I would have, but it's not. I'm not expecting a ton from it. I don't know if I had this pivot charted out, guys. I'm gonna have to look on the recording, but I don't think I had this pivot charted out. Really, my PT was just kind of ES new high of day because I assume NQ is gonna get there first. But maybe my PT should have been this pivot. Let me see. But anyways, this was pretty much a trade. I sold here. And looks like good. It was not the pivot. So this is where I sold. It was pretty much it. The PT that I just kind of randomly placed based on the risk to reward was roughly a 1.8 risk to reward trade, 1.9-ish. The PT was just kind of where I thought NQ would be by the time ES got new high of day, and I was 100% correct. ES got new high of day here, and that was just kind of my PT, just fairly subjective. Didn't go to the pivot or anything. Again, if this high were like this, I would go to the pivot. But because it swept liquidity and already went down, I'm not expecting as much. The more textbook it is, statistically, the more better it is. So that was the first trade. That was a nice win. And now I had only higher lows on NQ. So I was looking for it. Okay, if we come down to here, I'm going to enter short for this low, right? This is the game plan. I like this game plan a lot. We come down, and I fill my shorts here. NQ actually looked like it flipped weaker than ES as well. So I filled them right here, kind of at the close of the candle. And I moved, so this was initially my stop loss, kind of just a 1-to-1, but I actually did move it to below this buying wick here. And this was my PT. It looked pretty good. No issues with it. You know, we swept higher highs. We rejected, invalidated majority of the move. We had not very nice volume. Notice the volume on this candle. Now look at the size of this candle and compare those two things to the last candle. You can see that it's bearish, especially because NQ rejected this upper supply as well. Or sorry, ES did. So this trade looked really good. But it ended up being a green to red trade and barely missed my PT. And stopped me out. Now, by the way, I moved my stop loss down to here. So it stopped me out for a pretty small loss. Actually, that loss was half the size of one winning trade. Again, that was kind of painful because I really wanted it to get here. But again, we only made, I mean, this is lower lows. But in the grand scheme of things, as far as the major lows are concerned, another higher low. And immediately from this, so I stopped out here on this candle. And immediately from this, what do I see? A perfect trend line. And you guys know I don't like perfect trend lines. I am bearish for perfect trend lines to break. Okay. We're also putting in an ascending broadening wedge. Now, ES, if you look at ES, it looks like a head and shoulders at the moment. And it barely missed this low. So this could be the neckline here. We are in supply. But the top of this supply is only a 30-minute supply. I'm thinking that could break. But at the moment, it is looking like a head and shoulders. And I say, honestly, if we come back down, I'm going to have to enter. I'm not really able to enter longs. I mean, maybe I could if, you know, I really wanted to. But NQ is weaker than ES. So I did not do that. So I waited. And I waited. And you can see that NQ is putting in kind of like a big bull pennant. ES broke that supply as expected. And this was actually looking okay for, if I'm just looking at the NQ chart, yes, there's a perfect trend line down there that I'm bearish to break at some point. But NQ's to me is starting to look like bullish consolidation again. It's like a bigger version of this setup right here. The problem though is NQ is so much weaker than ES, and ES is pretty much only going up. So I don't want to take longs on NQ, because if I take longs on NQ and my PT is here, which it would be, that means ES has to get like all the way up to here because ES is stronger, and that's a little too far away. So I don't really think longs is good enough probability for me to enter, especially, and also you have to think about what happens if the trade doesn't work out. Well, if I enter longs up here, and this would be my PT, a fairly close PT, 1-to-1 minimum, I probably go 1.2. What happens if I stop out? I'm confirmed into shorts. Am I going to be willing to take a loss and reverse and immediately go short? That's something I usually don't like doing because that exposes me to 2 losses back to back. And you guys know I keep my trades limited, so 2 trades is a lot, right? And I don't want to use up 2 trades within 5 minutes. So I have to think, which trade would I much rather take, the longs or the shorts? And for me, it's the shorts, right? Because if we go up and sweep that pivot and come back down, I would love to take the short trade. I don't feel like I missed out on the long trade because there are too many red flags. NQ's too weak, too much weaker, right? It's way too weak. And ES is starting to get up high in supply. So for those reasons, I cannot take longs. But I draw this out, and you see the low of this buying wick here. Well, if we break the low of that buying wick with no indication of us sweeping, this is the short trade I want to take. Now, it's going to be a little sketchy because I want NQ to make a higher high and kind of sweep the trend line, but it didn't, unfortunately. But the thing is, man, NQ is so much weaker than ES. So much weaker. Look at ES go. And it's also kind of a rising wedge at the moment. So NQ was very tempting for shorts. But you can see that the top trend line is almost a perfect trend line. Here's the rising wedge there. It's almost a perfect trend line. So I'm kind of bullish for it to break, but this is the trade. The trade that I drew on the right, that's the trade that I want to take. We dropped pretty much to my entry, but I waited. Was very careful to let the candle close fully, not even last 10 seconds, like last 2 seconds. Because if it puts in any buying wick, I'm not getting in at all. And it did, so I waited. And ES swept a higher high, and NQ fell This was a bearish candle with bearish volume, invalidated majority of the bounce. ES retested this bottom trend line almost. I entered shorts here. Now, I believe my stop loss was roughly here. No, it was like right here. It was like right here, but my entry was more down here. Yeah, I moved my stop loss up to there. This is a trade I got to get in. It's a trade I waited. I sold that last trade at 9:01. It's now 9:23. I waited 20 minutes. And I had this trade drawn up the whole time. I have to take it, right? And it actually has pretty good odds. The thing that bugs me is this trend line up here. Well, the second I get into the trade, NQ flips strong and just goes right back up. So I'm like, that's going to stop out. And immediately after I enter the trade, I told you guys not to enter unless unless that green candle invalidates. So that was a very quick loss. And unfortunately, that's not a long trade I could take because I was too busy losing money on shorts. But that was a very valid short trade, and we got to my pivot. Now, I did say, though, because I'm starting to be bearish up here. You know, as ES gets in this overlapping supply, I'm bearish for a pullback. Now, it is a nice pivot, and I do think it's attractive for price action, but you guys know statistically we have gone up quite a ways without a pullback. I think it's pretty dang likely we put in a cup and handle. And I told you guys that, and if you look at price action right now, that's pretty much exactly what it did, or it's doing. It's putting in a cup and handle, right? So that's what I was thinking. And by the time ES would be in this overlapping supply, NQ would be at this pivot. So I was totally open to take a reversal trade if I got volume. If price action swept the pivot, I got volume and a bearish reversal candle. And ideally, I would want to enter it roughly up here. I'm willing to take that trade. Okay. Again, doesn't have very high probability. By now, I'm slightly red on the day. And, but I'm willing to take it. I think it has good odds that we're going to top out somewhere around there. Well, we swept it, and we put in the craziest reversal candle ever with high volume. But I waited for the next candle to fill my entry because I wanted to fill on a bounce because I wanted to enter. I didn't want to have as terrible of an average. So I took this trade unavoidable. Again, this is a trade I planned out way before it happened. Gorgeous reversal trade. Looked bad because the candle I entered while it had a selling wick. And unfortunately, again, NQ flipped stronger than ES and ended up stopping me out. And I called it before it happened. I said, watch NQ flip strong, sweep new high of day, and then come down, and ES won't even get high of day. And that's exactly what happened. ES didn't even get new high of day. So I stopped out there for a fairly small loss. Again, that's 3 losses in a row. I'm now red by one small-ish green trade, which is pretty annoying. Keep in mind, it's been over an hour since my last green trade. So over the last hour, I've done nothing but lose. Literally nothing but lose. So not much psych deterioration, but just annoyed with the way price action's acting. I mean, if this candle was any less bearish, I wouldn't have got in. I was so picky. Any major buying wick, anything weird, I wouldn't have got in. Same thing here. I literally had to get in those trades, including this one. All 3 of these short trades are great, but it's also annoying to me too that I'm only getting in short trades during an uptrend. I usually don't like doing that, but I kind of don't have a choice because I'm just getting confirmed in, and I'm being picky. Like, I'm not just allowing myself to get confirmed into trades I don't agree with. My hypothesis is that we reject the supply on ES, and that we're going to reject somewhere down here and start heading down, and this trend line's perfect. I want this thing to break. But I have to stop out. I have to honor my stop losses because this is a pivot on ES. Maybe it just goes there. Well, anyways, we put in a reversal setup right here, and I do call it out. I said that's a reversal trade. I do not enter it, though. Why don't I enter it? Well, I just took a loss on a reversal trade. I'm not willing to lose again on another reversal trade. It doesn't look bad to reverse to the downside. But the problem is I don't want to keep entering reversal trades during an uptrend. That is a great way to not only rack up a lot of losses in hopes that you finally hit that big reversal trade that's going to make all your losses back. But your psychology is going to deteriorate along the way. That's not something I want to do. And because ES missed new high of day, I'm thinking that a bull flag is it's too likely to form for me to just hop into another reversal trade, right? If this were somehow my first reversal trade, I'd take it, but this didn't even have a volume spike. Sure enough, it did end up being the reversal that actually worked out. So I'm like, okay, if ES comes all the way back up, that is bullish consolidation. I can take a long through that pivot, roughly here. Yeah, that's trade idea number one. Otherwise, I am not getting in unless NQ makes me get in. Okay, I don't want to take any slightly low probability trade. I need most of this move to invalidate by a majority, which means I'm entering all the way roughly down here, and this is going to be my PT, and this is going to be my stop loss, right? 1.4-ish risk to reward trade. This is the trade that I'm looking to enter, which means we're going to need to break this previous top trend line for me to get in. We put in this kind of small bearish consolidation there on NQ while ES was weak. But what happened? Right as I got into the trade, NQ flipped weak and dumped. Sure, I could enter ES, but I told you guys, I'm like, the last 3 short trades in a row, NQ flipped weak at the time of entry. I entered NQ, and then it flipped strong. What are the odds that it happens again? It's like, what are the odds that the roulette ball lands on red for a 6th time in a row? That's a gambler's fallacy in me, so I went with NQ. So I entered on this candle. It didn't get a good average because the candle was a bit far, right? It was pretty far. And here's my stop loss. Ended up being like a 1.2 risk to reward trade, a little better than that. And yeah, I mean, this is just supply confirmation. So I wait, we bounce out of demand, we start putting in we start bouncing a little bit. I see a head and shoulders on ES forming, NQ flips weak. Beautiful that it flipped weak. And this was bearish consolidation. If I wasn't in yet, I would have for sure been in on this red candle. So this bearish consolidation looks pretty good. I'm concerned about NQ making lower lows because then we can have a falling wedge. That's exactly what it did here. It put in a falling wedge, as you guys can see. So I was concerned that this would break to the upside. But it was still a good trade. It was weaker than ES. It is a falling wedge. But on top of it, this trend line is still perfect, right? Will Daddy Trump bail this out? By the way, also, it's right around here that I was thinking, I'm like, you know what, guys? This PT's fine. It's a fine PT on NQ. I'm just looking for this lowest low, right? Look at the size of this pattern. I mean, this is an ascending broadening wedge. Look at the size of the pattern. Look at the size of the leg. This looks proportional, right? Huge first leg, huge pattern. You guys know ascending broadening wedges are reversal patterns. The width of this ascending broadening wedge, we can say it's roughly like right here. Well, if this broke to the downside, that would give me a PT of all the way down here. Where did this descending broadening wedge happen? Is there a major pivot above this that it missed? A major supply that it missed? No. In fact, it topped out after getting beautiful volume. Unfortunately, not the volume that... by the way, my psych was a little deteriorated because, again, I called the top. I said this was a great reversal trade. Of course, the one that I don't take is the one that plays out. So, could have made way more, but whatever. But look where the pattern is. It happened after sweeping a pivot. This 1 minute pivot. What about ES? Major supply. So there's that. I'm like, you know, I may be selling myself short with this PT. Let's look at ES. ES made a higher low here, so I have to think, okay, NQ is a lot weaker than ES. If we do fall to this PT here on NQ, where would ES be? I'm thinking ES would be here. Okay, do I think that ES is likely to at least sweep this low once it invalidates most of this run? Well, let's look at the way it's been going up. Is it curling upwards? No. Is it showing like bullish volume on the way up? No. Is it kind of just chopping its way up? Yes. So when it validates a majority of this bounce, I'm thinking it's going to make a lower low. Okay, if it makes a lower low, so it gets this additional space here, I'm thinking NQ will at least get to here. Additional space, right? And then what do we think about ES getting to demand? I don't think it's that far off. I think ES can get to demand, which would mean NQ would go a little bit lower. And finally, my ES pivot, where do I think ES can get all the way down to the pivot? Well, it's a solid pivot, and it already missed it once. I don't think it's out of the realm of possible. I think there's like a solid 60-70% chance that it gets this pivot. Maybe 60, right? Which would put NQ somewhere all the way kind of down here. But I'm like, okay. So that would put NQ like all the way like roughly down here. But that's really far. I'm like, okay, is there a reasonable PT that I can place that if ES even gets to demand, NQ can hit? So I whip out the fibs, and what do you know? The 38.2% PT really lines up with the width of the pattern. And I think it's reasonable because if ES continues all the way down, because again, I'm hypothesizing that by the time NQ's at this PT here, ES is going to be here. If ES does get all the way down to the pivot, that means NQ can get all the way down to here and even here. Newsflash, it did get all the way, or sorry, not newsflash, spoiler alert, it did get down to here. It's glorious. But anyways. So we take a vote. I'm like, you know, this is a really big pattern. I don't know if it's even going to go back down because it's a falling wedge. But if it does go back down, we need to make a decision. If I win this trade, I will be small green on the day by like half of one green trade. Because this trade is 50% bigger than my what I need, right? So I'll be green by like half of one green trade. Or do I go for a home run? Well, in combination with the ES pivot below that it could get to in the demand, and the supply ES is rejecting, and NQ's weakness, with the pivot that it swept, with the width of the pattern that's proportional to the first leg, and the fib PT that just so happens to line up with the width of the pattern, going for the home run looks pretty good. So that's what we do. And I had my order here still, but I extended my PT down to here. But then I deleted my order. I'm like, you know what? In the small chance that it blows through this low, I'm going to keep my order down here because I can always, if it starts chopping down more or something, ES does something like this and puts in a huge bull pennant or something, I want the ability to sell at the initial PT, right? And I can do that. I can just manually sell if my PT's down here. I can't move my PT down if I keep a hard price target here, though. So I deleted it. Well, Daddy Trump bailed us out, and it dumped. And it was beautiful. And then I sold. It did end up getting down a little bit more. But today ended up a fairly okay. I mean, I was green by about 2 trades because of that. So not like a huge green day by any means. But it was a pretty good day. And that's the way it ended, with a beautiful home run. I was very happy about that. So yeah, both options and futures were pretty good. If you guys have questions, I'll give you guys a second to type it in chat while I yell at my cat for knocking off a pot that you guys may have just heard. The cat's disciplined. Okay, Missy says, well, it looks like I was lucky that I slept over the open. When I got in 15 minutes after the open and saw ES moving like NQ, decided to go with only 2 micros, took my $50 and left. Okay. Yeah, I loved Market Open. Market Open was good. Swaggy says, without the Trump talk, do you think there would have gotten there? I have no idea, Swaggy. Probably not. But you know, trading is fascinating because it's so interesting how fundamentals and TA just so happen to perfectly line up with each other. Like, when I first started studying patterns in penny stocks, or in regular stocks, I remember Nvidia had like the most beautiful falling wedge ever back when it was only like $100 or whatever it was. Um, I hate myself for not buying it, but it happens. Um, it was a gorgeous falling wedge. No, AMD was like a gorgeous falling wedge, and right when it looked ready to break out, the next day massive news happened and it broke out, and that was kind of like the first time I'm like, how is it that TA and fundamentals will go so hand in hand and line up so perfectly to where, and it happens all the time, right when you have a pattern that looks ready to break out, some news will happen and it'll break out. Um, so that's just the way it goes. You know, the fundamentals in TA are so intertwined that a lot of times you'll have patterns that break because of reasons that had nothing to do with the TA, but it just so happens to happen, right? So who cares? It's just stats. Ascending broadening wedges statistically are more likely to break to the downside. The stats don't include why they break to the downside or if it were earnings or news or something that caused it to break. It's just if it breaks or not. So it does not matter, right? No, Alex, there's no need to Alex asked a good question. He says, do I journal it that says do I make a journal entry that says I'm lucky that Trump talked and dumped the market to the PT? No. Because then I would just write it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. Because then I'd write on this reversal candle or this candle right here, I'm super unlucky that it waited 4 seconds before popping up. Otherwise, it would have put in a buying week and I would have missed out on that trade. Like, you're not supposed to write every time you get unlucky or lucky. It's just the way it is, you know? Who cares why it got there? Like Mark Douglas says, the why is completely irrelevant, and very rarely is the average retail trader the reason why they put on their trade is the real reason the market went up. So, no, who cares if it was luck? I don't care. Pretty much all my red trades are pretty unlucky. All my trades are statistically likely to play out. But as you guys know, during this time of day, I've tended to be pretty unlucky lately. So, all right, doesn't look like there's any more questions. Does the demand count as a minor pivot? Not really. Demand isn't really a pivot for me. But no questions. Everyone's good. All right, sweet. Well, I'm gonna end the recording here. You guys have 10 minutes until today's giveaway, so I'm going to announce that again and then draw the winners. And yeah, we'll lock in today's green day. I'm actually gonna host a live psychology lesson because there's a couple lessons I need to re-record. So I'm gonna host a live psychology lesson tomorrow. I'll be there for that. And then this weekend, I'm gonna start sending announcements for the upcoming mentorship that's gonna be starting at the end of the month. But all right, and yes, Alex, it'll be 12 people. But all right, I'll see you guys later. If I don't see you again in chat, have a blessed rest of your day, and we'll be back tomorrow for hopefully another bright green day.